It started on a scorching afternoon in Sunville, a city that sizzles with ambition and ego. Luxury Motors sat gleaming under the sun, its showroom windows catching the light like a promise of prestige. It was the kind of place where power was, measured not just in horsepower, but in assumptions. No one expected that the man who pulled up in an unmarked SUV, wearing a faded grey hoodie and worn jeans, was about to challenge everything they thought they knew. That man was Dwayne Johnson. Yes, that Dwayne Johnson. But today he wasn't here as a movie star, a wrestling icon, or a media mogul. He was here as the silent owner, the brand new proprietor of Luxury Motors. And he didn't want fanfare. He didn't want applause. What he wanted was the truth. He stepped out of his SUV quietly, parked far away from the luxury lineup out front. No one recognized him. That was the point. He didn't need to be seen. He needed to see. He took a slow look at the dealership's facade, the shiny glass front, the expensive cars lined like trophies, and then he walked in. Inside, the contrast hit instantly. Air conditioning hummed like a whisper of class. The scent of fresh leather floated gently in the air. Overhead, lights reflected off polished chrome and tinted windshields. Dwayne took it in without a word, just a quiet, deliberate breath. He wasn't there to shop. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to watch, to listen, to test something far more important than talk or trim packages. He approached the main floor, where a small group of employees laughed near the front desk. Their conversation dimmed the moment he walked in. Their eyes found his hoodie, his sneakers. Then they glanced at each other, and he saw it. The shift, the unspoken judgment, the kind that never had to be voiced aloud to be understood. Then she appeared, Elena, mid-40s, perfectly put together, the kind of manager who measured her worth in commissions and appearances. Sharp blazer, sharper gaze, clipboard clutched. Like a badge of rank, she approached him with a thin, practiced smile. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, her voice polite, but polished like glass. Smooth and cold. Dwayne nodded. "Just looking around," he replied, casual, relaxed. Too relaxed, it seemed. Her eyes scanned him from the hoodie to the scuffed soles of his sneakers. Her smile never broke, but the warmth never came either. "Are you looking to buy?" Her tone didn't accuse, but it didn't invite either. "Something like that," he said. "Well," she began, already reaching for the barrier. "Our inventory tends to cater to a specific clientele. Most of our vehicles require pre-qualification." There it was. Dwayne said nothing. He just raised an eyebrow, the kind of gesture that asked a quiet, cutting question. "Really?" Elena barely blinked. "Maybe I can recommend something more in your price range," she added smoothly, still assuming, still judging. And in that moment, Dwayne knew this wasn't just a dealership. This was a mirror, and it was about to show everyone who they really were. Dwayne stood silently, letting Elena's words settle in the air like dust in a sunbeam. She was trying to be subtle, to keep things professional, but the edge in her tone wasn't lost on him. She wasn't seeing a potential customer. She was seeing someone who, in her eyes, didn't belong. Before she could continue her subtle dismissal, another employee shouted across the showroom, "Hey, Elena, the delivery guy's here!" Her attention flicked away for just a second, but when she turned back, Dwayne hadn't moved, still calm, still smiling faintly, still not fitting into her narrow definition of a buyer. "You're assuming I'm not qualified," he said, his voice even, quiet, but laced with weight. Elena paused, caught off guard for the briefest moment. Then her polished exterior returned. "I'm just trying to save you some time," she said with a half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "These vehicles start at 6 figures. Maybe I can direct you to something more appropriate." Dwayne looked around slowly, letting his gaze wander over the pristine line of cars. He stepped closer to a sleek silver coupe and gently touched the handle. "Nice car," he said, as if to himself. Elena stepped forward immediately. "Please don't touch the vehicles unless you're ready to make a serious inquiry," she said more firmly this time. Her authority sharpened, her patience clearly fraying. Dwayne stepped back, hands casually in his pockets. "Fair enough," he said, giving her a small nod. "So, what would you recommend for someone like me?" His tone was neutral, but his question hit hard. There was no malice, no sarcasm, just the calm precision of someone holding a mirror up to another person's. Judgment. Elena hesitated for a breath, then recovered. "Maybe something a little more budget-friendly. I can give you directions to a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles," she replied, with the faintest edge of finality in her voice. Dwayne didn't flinch. He just gave a polite smile, though it never quite reached his eyes. "That's quite the assumption," he said, soft, almost amused. Elena didn't answer. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked away, clipboard clutched like a shield, shoes clicking against the showroom floor. Dwayne watched her go, his expression unreadable. He turned back to the coupe, its gleaming surface reflecting back a man who had been underestimated more times than he could count. It was familiar, but that didn't mean it was acceptable. Moments later, Elena returned with a stack of papers, her movements brisk. "Here," she said, holding out a list of pre-owned vehicles. "These might be more suitable to your situation." Her tone was clipped, professional, but tinged with something colder. Irritation, maybe, or quiet condescension. Dwayne tilted his head slightly. "My situation?" "Yes," Elena said quickly, as if moving past it would make it sound less offensive. "These are reliable, economical options, practical." He took the list and scanned it in silence. A used sedan, an older SUV, a compact hybrid. His mouth twitched into a slight smile, just enough to register amusement without giving anything away. He folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. "Appreciate the effort." She seemed momentarily thrown by his calm, as if she'd expected either anger or embarrassment. She got neither. "Look," she said, dropping her voice, trying now to sound like she was offering a favor. "I'm just being realistic with you. Luxury motors isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste your time." Dwayne locked eyes with her, unblinking. "And what exactly makes you think I'm not your target customer?" Elena froze, just for a second. Then she straightened her shoulders. "I've been doing this a long time. I can tell when someone's out of their depth." "Out of their depth," Dwayne repeated softly, as though tasting the words. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He didn't have to. Every word landed like a stone in still water. Whatever Elena had assumed about him, whatever quick judgments she had formed, this was only the beginning. The air inside the dealership thickened, not with heat, but with something heavier. The silence between Dwayne and Elena said more than any shouting match ever could. She had drawn her conclusions, handed him the list, and expected him to just leave. Maybe she thought he'd slink away embarrassed. Maybe she thought she'd saved him the trouble. But Dwayne Johnson wasn't the kind of man who backed away from judgment. He stood firm, letting her assumptions echo in her own ears. "I'm just being honest," Elena added, her voice almost defensive now. "It's better to be up front than to have someone walk away disappointed." Dwayne chuckled softly, shaking his head, not in anger but in disbelief. His voice lowered, calm but sharp. "Honesty's good. I like honesty. So let's be honest. Why don't you let me speak to the owner? Think we can make that happen?" That caught her off guard. For the first time, the manager's mask cracked just a little. She blinked, surprised. "The owner?" "Yes," he said plainly. "Well, that's not possible today," she answered, her tone trying to remain composed. "The owner doesn't just drop by for casual visits. They're a busy person." "I'm sure they are," Dwayne replied, nodding as if he completely agreed. Then he added without missing a beat, But maybe you could give them a call. Let them know I'm here. I think they'd want to meet me." Elena's smile tightened. Her patience was unraveling, thread by thread. "Sir, I'm trying to be polite, but this is getting a little ridiculous. I have other customers to attend to. If you're serious about buying a car, we can schedule a meeting with one of our consultants. Otherwise—" She paused. Dwayne didn't move. "Otherwise what?" he asked, his voice still calm, but unmistakably firm now. The question landed like a weight on the floor. Elena's jaw tensed. "Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." And there it was. The line crossed. She had just told the new owner of the dealership to leave his own building. The room, which had been quietly buzzing with casual conversation moments before, had grown still. Several employees had started to watch, their curiosity piqued by the tension building across the floor. No one spoke, but the silence was full of shifting eyes and nervous fidgeting. Dwayne reached slowly into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and began scrolling. Elena stiffened. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Just calling the owner," he replied, casual as ever. "Shouldn't take long." Elena's expression shifted. She couldn't place what was happening, but something felt wrong, or maybe too right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place she hadn't realized was missing. Dwayne lifted the phone to his ear. "Yeah, it's me. I'm at the dealership. Everything's fine. Just a little misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here?" He paused. "Thanks." He ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and turned back to her. "They'll be here shortly," he said. Elena stared at him, her mouth parting slightly. Who did you just call?" Dwayne didn't answer, not directly. Instead, he looked around the showroom where a few more employees had stopped mid-task to observe. He gave them a small smile. "Guess we'll find out," he said, and that was all he had to say. The tension in the room was no longer just between two people. It spread like heat, settling in everyone's chest, making them hold their breath. Elena stepped back slightly, suddenly unsure of the ground she stood on. She turned away, flipping through her clipboard, like it could explain what just happened, like it could protect her from the shift she didn't see coming. And Dwayne? He just stood there, beside a luxury SUV, quiet and composed. Not angry, not smug, just waiting, because he knew exactly what was about to walk through that door, and so did we. The room was frozen, yet everything felt like it was vibrating, like the air itself was holding its breath. Elena stood rigid by the counter, flipping through her clipboard, with hands that were just a little too stiff, movements just a little too fast. Around the showroom, staff shifted uncomfortably, whispering behind desks, casting glances toward Dwayne. No one knew exactly what was going on, but they could sense it, like a storm building far out to sea just before the first crack of thunder. Dwayne didn't move. He stood beside a luxury SUV like he belonged there, which of course he did, but no one else knew that, not yet. He wasn't gloating, he wasn't grandstanding, he was just waiting. Calm, patient, grounded in a truth no one else had caught up to yet. Then, click. The sound of the dealership's main doors opening felt louder than it should have. All heads turned as a sharply dressed man in a navy blue suit stepped inside. His shoes clicked softly against the tile, his stride confident but purposeful. His eyes scanned the room and landed straight on Dwayne. "Mr. Johnson," he said, smiling warmly. "So good to see you." Dwayne returned the smile, extending his hand. "Thanks for coming, Vince. Appreciate it." Vince, regional director of Luxury Motors, gripped Dwayne's hand with visible respect. It was subtle, but everyone watching could see the shift. This wasn't just a friendly handshake, it was a recognition, a greeting between equals, or rather, a greeting from subordinate to superior. And that's when the color drained from Elena's face. She blinked, her eyes darting from Vince to Dwayne, back to Vince again. Her clipboard, the same one she had, wielded like a symbol of authority. nearly slipped from her grip. "Wait, Mr. Johnson," she echoed, voice cracking ever so slightly. Vince turned toward her, his professional expression now cooler, more formal. "Eleanor, I see you've already met Mr. Johnson," she stammered, visibly unraveling. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize," Vince interrupted, his tone calm but sharp, "that he's the new owner of this dealership." The words dropped like a stone into a still lake. Every employee in the room heard it. Every pair of eyes widened. Conversations died in throats. A collective hush fell over the space. Dwayne stayed steady, but his eyes met Vince's. The older man looked apologetic, but Dwayne raised a hand gently. "It's all right," he said. "I think Elena and I just got off on the wrong foot." The way he said it, measured, forgiving, but unmistakably firm, left no room for doubt. This wasn't a minor misunderstanding. This was a moment of reckoning. Elena stepped back, her clipboard now clutched to her chest like a shield. I'm so sorry," she whispered. Her voice had lost all authority. "I didn't know." Dwayne looked at her, not with anger, but with a kind of disappointment that cut deeper. "Didn't know what?" he asked. "That I could own a place like this, that someone like me might actually belong here?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her silence filled the room with something heavier than any accusation ever could. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence, his calm, that was the real power. Dwayne let the silence stretch, the weight of it forcing everyone in the room to confront something uncomfortable. Then he turned to Vince, voice low but resolute. "Let's gather everyone in. The conference room," he said. "I think it's time we had a little talk about how things are run around here." The tension followed them like a shadow. One by one, the staff filtered into the dealership's sleek, glass-walled conference room, a space usually meant to impress high-end clients, now transformed into something far more intimate, far more sobering. The room, with its modern furnishings and spotless surfaces, suddenly felt colder, quieter, like it had been stripped of all its shine. Dwayne stood at the head of the long conference table, calm but commanding, his hands resting lightly on the edge as employees slowly settled into their seats. Elena sat toward the back, her usual confident posture replaced with a stillness that made her seem smaller somehow. Her clipboard sat untouched in her lap now, not a badge of control, but a reminder of everything that had just unfolded. Vince stood by the door, arms crossed, silently observing. He didn't need to say anything. This moment wasn't his to lead, it belonged to Dwayne. When everyone was seated and the last of the murmurs faded, Dwayne cleared his throat, his voice even but powerful. "Thank you all for joining me on short notice," he began. "For those who don't know, my name is Dwayne Johnson, and as of last month I became the new owner of Luxury Motors." A ripple moved through the room, soft gasps, widened eyes, a few stolen glances. Some employees had already figured it out from the scene on the showroom floor, but hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that stung. "I came here today," Dwayne continued, "not to make an entrance, not to be seen. I dressed simply, on purpose. I wanted to see this place the way a customer might, someone who doesn't look like they just stepped off a private jet, someone who isn't flashing cash or wearing a $10,000 watch. I wanted to feel how they'd be treated." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, letting the words settle like dust on polished glass. "And what I experienced today was disappointing." A wave of discomfort shifted through the staff. No one dared speak. Eleanor stared down at her, a clipboard, as if looking at it might make her disappear. "I was judged," Dwayne said, "not for my character, not for my intentions, but for my appearance, for my clothes, for what someone assumed I could or couldn't afford. And I want to be clear, this isn't just about me." He stepped away from the table, his movement slow and deliberate. This is about every single person who walks through our doors, every customer, every family, every dreamer. It's about whether they feel respected, whether they feel like they matter regardless of how they look. From the side of the room, a younger employee, Chris, tentatively raised his hand. Dwayne nodded. "Go ahead." Chris cleared his throat. "Mr. Johnson, I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes I guess it's easy to make assumptions. We don't always realize it, but it happens." Dwayne nodded thoughtfully. "That's honest, Chris, and I appreciate it. Because here's the thing, we all have biases, every one of us, but recognizing that's step one. What matters is what we do next, whether we let those biases run the show or whether we challenge them." He turned back to the group, his tone shifting, firmer now. "This dealership has a reputation for excellence, but excellence isn't just about the cars we sell. It's about the way we make people feel when they walk in. From now on, that standard is going to include respect, fairness, and inclusion." The silence that followed was heavier than before, but something was changing. A sense of reflection rippled through the team, like they were realizing the weight of what this moment really meant. Dwayne's eyes landed on Eleanor. He didn't call her out directly, but the message was clear. And the conversation? It wasn't over. The silence in the room wasn't just quiet, it was instructive. It asked questions that couldn't be dodged, held mirrors no one could turn away from. At the center of it stood Dwayne Johnson, still calm, still unwavering, as every employee sat with the echo of his words. This wasn't a lecture. It was a wake-up call, and now it was Eleanor's turn to speak. Dwayne's eyes found her. His voice softened but didn't lose its strength. "Elena," he said, his tone even but unmistakably direct, "I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak. Is there anything you'd like to say?" Every head turned to her. The woman, who just an hour earlier walked the floor with the confidence of someone who thought they knew exactly who belonged and who didn't, now sat still, her fingers interlaced tightly in her lap. She opened her mouth, but no words came. A deep breath later, she tried again. "I made a mistake," she said, the words thin but raw. "I misjudged you, and for that, I'm truly sorry." Her voice trembled slightly, the kind of shake that comes when pride makes room for honesty. She wasn't trying to defend herself anymore. She wasn't hiding behind the clipboard or the blazer. She was just a human being, flawed, exposed, and trying to face herself. Dwayne gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "I appreciate it, but more importantly, I hope this moment sticks. Because this," he motioned lightly to the group, "this is bigger than you or me. It's about the standard we set, the message we send when we treat someone like they don't belong." He let the words hang, knowing their weight would do the rest. Then turning back to the rest of the staff, Dwayne's voice lifted with a renewed focus. "From today forward, we're implementing new training across every department. Training built around respect, empathy, and inclusion. Because Luxury Motors isn't just going to be a place that sells high-end cars. It's going to be a place that delivers high-end humanity." There were subtle nods around the table. Even some who had remained tense earlier now seemed to lean, drawn by the sincerity of the moment. "No one here is expected to be perfect," Dwayne continued, "but you are expected to be accountable, to grow, to change, and if anyone has a problem with that, now would be the time to speak up." He looked around. No one moved. The hum of the air conditioning was the only response. Not a single voice raised in dissent. Dwayne let it sit, then nodded with quiet resolve. "Good," he said. "That's what I like to hear." He leaned slightly on the edge of the table, hands steady. "Let me be clear. I didn't come here today to embarrass anyone. I came here to understand what kind of culture I was walking into, and I believe it can be better. I believe it has to be better." His eyes returned to Eleanor. Not with vengeance, but with challenge. and maybe a little hope. You're an experienced manager. I'm sure you've worked hard to get where you are, but today was a wake-up call for you, for everyone in this room. Elena nodded slowly, her eyes meeting his for the first time without flinching. I understand, she said. Her voice was no longer shaky, but firm, grounded in something real. I was wrong, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Dwayne gave her one final nod. I believe in second chances, he said, but accountability always comes first. He stood tall again, turning to face the full team. Now, let's move forward, together, and let's build something that reflects not just excellence in vehicles, but excellence in people. The meeting concluded not with applause, but with a shared sense of gravity, like everyone had just witnessed. Something bigger than themselves. As the employees filed out of the conference room, their footsteps quieter than usual, there was no small talk, no idle chatter. Instead, there was reflection. That lingering silence wasn't awkward. It was purposeful. Something inside each of them had shifted, even if they couldn't yet put it into words. Dwayne stood at the head of the room for a moment longer, watching them go. Vince approached with a nod of approval, a quiet but unmistakable acknowledgement of what had just been accomplished. Dwayne gave a slight smile in return, satisfied but far from finished. There was still work to do. Outside the room, the showroom had resumed its regular rhythm. But it wasn't quite the same. The laughter was more restrained, the conversations more thoughtful. Eyes no longer glanced past customers, they lingered with intention. The difference was subtle, but it was real. Then, just before the crowd had fully cleared, Elena lingered by the doorway. She clutched her clipboard again, not as a defense this time, but almost like an anchor. She approached Dwayne slowly. No longer trying to reclaim authority, but to earn back trust. Mr. Johnson, she said softly, I want to thank you for giving me a chance to do better. Her voice didn't tremble now. It was grounded in something stronger than confidence, humility. I won't let you down. Dwayne looked at her for a long moment. He didn't respond. Immediately, didn't rush to offer forgiveness like it was a formality. He simply measured her words, then gave a quiet nod. I hope you mean that, Eleanor, he said, his voice steady. Because words are easy. Actions, they're what count. She nodded back, her eyes clear. I do. And with that, she walked away, not out of shame, but ready to rebuild. Later that week, Dwayne returned to Luxury Motors. But this time, the energy in the air was different, lighter, more welcoming. He stood off to the side of the showroom, observing once again, not as a test, but out of genuine curiosity. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. Elena, poised, focused, was speaking with a new customer. The young man wore a simple hoodie, jeans with paint splatters, and carried a sketch pad tucked under one arm. Clearly an artist, clearly not flashy. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She didn't assume. She didn't dismiss. She smiled, leaned in, and listened, really listened. She asked thoughtful questions. She treated him like he belonged. And that was the moment Dwayne knew the message had landed. Not just heard, but felt. Not just accepted, but absorbed. He watched from a distance, saying nothing, letting the scene play out naturally. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. This wasn't about one person learning a lesson. It was about culture shifting, slowly, but meaningfully. What started as an undercover visit had sparked something deeper than he expected. Respect had taken root, and while change wasn't instant, it had begun. Luxury Motors would never be the same again. And that was exactly the point. A few days had passed, but the energy at Luxury Motors hadn't faded. If anything, it had deepened. Respect was no longer just a policy. It was becoming a practice, and as Dwayne Johnson stepped through the showroom one final time that week, he could feel it. Not in grand gestures, but in the small details that mattered most. The way employees made eye contact with every customer, the extra seconds they spent listening, the genuine smiles instead of rehearsed ones. This wasn't just a business anymore. It was starting to feel like a place where people were seen, valued, welcome. As he passed the front desk, Vince approached with his usual steady calm. "You were right," he said simply, nodding toward the staff who were now greeting guests with a renewed warmth. The message landed. Dwayne returned the nod, his expression thoughtful. And now the real work begins. What had started as a quiet test had turned into something bigger, a shift not just in behavior, but in identity. Luxury Motors wasn't just about high-end vehicles anymore. It was about high-standard values. Dwayne wasn't interested in surface-level change. He wanted something that would last, something rooted in humanity. He walked past Elena, who was once again helping a customer. She glanced up, met his eyes, and gave a subtle nod. There was no fear in her face now, no pretense, just focus, intention, growth. That was all he needed. As Dwayne stood near the front windows, watching the reflection of the city ripple against the glass, he thought about how easy it would have been to walk away that first day, to dismiss the disrespect, to make a scene, or even to fire someone on the spot. But that wouldn't have changed the culture. That wouldn't have taught anything. Instead, he chose to stay, to show, to lead. Because leadership isn't about power. It's about presence. It's about who you are when no one knows your name. It's about who you choose to be when someone underestimates you. And it's about what you build when people finally understand they were wrong. Not just about you, but about what they believed success should look like. As the video closes, we see Elena once again engaging with a customer who, not long ago, she might have overlooked. A teenager in thrift store clothes, wide-eyed, asking questions about a dream car far beyond his budget. But Elena listens, encourages, plants a seed. And standing a few feet away, Dwayne watches with quiet pride because he knows it's working. The culture is changing. Respect is no longer a courtesy, it's the currency. And this is just the beginning. So if you've ever walked into a place and felt like you didn't belong, if someone ever judged you by what you wore instead of who you were, this story is for you. If you've ever worked in a space that forgot what kindness looked like, or if you've been that person who needed to be reminded, remember, one moment, one conversation, one choice to pause instead of assume, that can shift everything. And if you believe we need more of that in the world, more accountability, more inclusion, more second chances, then do us a favor. Like, share, comment, tell us your story, and let's keep this conversation going, because how we treat people, that's the legacy we leave behind. And sometimes the quietest visit turns into the loudest lesson. Now you know what they didn't. The men they pushed away? He was the boss. And the moment they judged him by his clothes, they revealed everything about themselves. But this isn't just a story about one dealership. It's a mirror, a reminder that we are constantly tested, not by how we treat the powerful, but how we treat the unseen, the underestimated, the ones we assume can't afford to belong. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect, smile, or even burn with frustration, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video. Drop a comment. Tell us what you would have done. Share it with someone who needs this reminder. And hit subscribe, because we're telling stories that change the way we see the world, because every person you meet is carrying a story you haven't heard yet. And sometimes they just might. Own the place.